What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York, calling from the altar again, and this time we are here with Justin of the Zenith Passage. It is great to be able to talk with you. Thanks for coming on the show today, man.
Yeah, dude, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, anytime, man. I got to tell you, your new album, Datalysium, is absolutely kick-ass from start to finish when you open up with the Axiom of Error, and then the way that you just managed to end it with the title track. It's really just a journey the entire way through. Was there sort of like a preconceived vision of what you wanted this album to sound like? Was it almost kind of like meant to pick up where you left off after Solipist, if I pronounce that correctly, or was this meant to sort of be like a new beginning for the Zenith Passage?
I mean, there was a general idea with the sound of the record. It was supposed to be like a mechanical kind of sound, but I think it kind of took on a little more humanity than machine in some aspects too. With like tracks like the title track Datalysium, and then the one before it, Automated Twilight. I think it's kind of a little more of an experiment of the harmonic palette. So yeah, I mean, that like tracks like that was kind of fun to stumble upon in the process of writing. But yeah, like tracks like Algorithmic, and then Lux Contagion, and then what is another one? A really mechanical Axiom. Yeah, those were all definitely in the vein of what I was trying to go for. Because I started writing the record in like 2017, and I kind of had a generalized idea of the sound, which was that machine sound, but further working on it during the pandemic kind of brought some new influence to the mix. So yeah, took some risks on some of the songs and tried to expand on the palette. So we'll see how it works with the with the public. So
I love what you just said, that it has more of an emphasis on humanity versus machine. I think that's like such a great sort of review behind it, because I feel like this record is a little bit, it still has a sort of like technical sound that I loved from the previous album, but it definitely has more of an atmospheric approach. And I think it's fair to say that the Zenith Passage's music is a fairly experimental sound with your use of, technical elements, progressive elements, straight up brutal elements. So it's fair to say that like trying new things and bringing new elements is almost just as much of a part of the songwriting process as anything else, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Like the underlying theme with everything the band does is obviously sci-fi related, but it's always like a balance between humanity and machine. And I think we try to expand and explore that more each record. The record we were originally going to put out, which is a symphonic record, was definitely heavily revolved around the machine aspect of everything. So, and then further expanding into this record. So yeah, it's definitely the underlying theme, like for the band, I would say, is the balance of humanity versus machine.
Are you a Fear Factory fan at all? Because they're one of my favorite bands of all time.
Oh, yeah.
I
love Fear Factory.
And that's pretty much their entire concept throughout their whole catalog.
Yeah, definitely. Mechanized is a great record.
Yeah, oh my God, Mechanized is awesome. Demanufacture, I just wrote an article on Demanufacture today, so it's so fun to be able to discuss that. We'll get a little bit more into the concept a little bit later, but for what I wanted to know is because you mentioned you started working on this album in 2017, but in 2017 you were also putting out In Becoming a Ghost by the Faceless as well, so did maybe like experimenting with other bands maybe allow you to open up new ideas and maybe like alter the direction that this new album would take, because it's been a long time since 2017?
Yeah, definitely learned a lot in the Faceless, and a lot of the stuff I was writing with Michael, a lot of it didn't really end up on that record. So I kind of rewrote it and repackaged it in a way that would fit the Zenith Passage, and that's kind of what our symphonic record is, the one that I kind of put on hiatus because of this record. But yeah, I definitely put a lot of writing from that era into the other record, not Datalysium, but definitely writing for that band too had helped me kind of define more of the sound that I wanted for the Zenith Passage. And then like I said, I think just a lot of riffs that I was spewing out in the vein of that era was kind of just redone and like revisualized for some of the riffs that ended up on Datalysium. And then, yeah, obviously I grew out of that after leaving the band in 2018. And I think I took a break from metal for a while too. So I kind of had to take a step back. And I think that might have kind of helped the direction and the palette that I was kind of going for that record for Datalysium.
Well, could that symphonic metal album ever see the light of day? Just because your songwriting process in general, I mean, the symphonic elements with the technical elements, I mean, it's no coincidence that you were also collaborating on that album with Ken from Abigail Williams. So I'd imagine that that those symphonic elements, we got to hear that one day, right?
Oh yeah, that's the next record, hopefully. So. And it's a good away finish too. So I got to just jump back into that as soon as we get all this record out and start touring on it. But yes, that definitely will be out. I just don't know exactly when. But yeah, I'm excited for that because it's a different sound.
Yeah.
But it's still obviously like you can hear that it's the Zenith passage too. So I'm interested to see how that one will sit with people.
Yeah. And this year pretty much marks 10 years that many people first heard the Zenith Passage with the Cosmic Dissonance EP. So the evolution that we've heard from the Zenith Passage onward, was this always the sound you were trying to achieve in a way, or were you kind of just letting the evolution sort of happen more organically?
Well, I've always been like a firm believer in just in the process of writing, of just following the thread and then see where it takes you. And I kind of had an idea of what I wanted the band to sound like from the beginning. And then I think, just like every other band, everyone's trying to challenge themselves and explore their own sound and experiment. And I think just through doing that through the last 10 years has kind of gotten us to where we're at, and kind of matured as a songwriter too, and as a musician. So I think it's kind of helped kind of refine the sound that I can hear in my head, I guess.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Because, I mean, from listening to, Tombs of Trepidation and Zenith and, Kaleidoscopic Tendencies, like, it just seems like there was always such, like, a sound that really was very thought-provoking. Lyrics or no lyrics, I feel like you do have a sound, even though you have your concepts that are addressed, I think you do have a sound that's meant to invoke thought in a way. I feel like you have the sort of thinking man's metal sound.
Yeah, that's funny you say thinking man's metal. We've heard that term before, which is I like that term, thinking man's metal. Someone also said it was what does it say, the highbrow, which is kind of funny to hear too. But yeah, it's kind of like thought-provoking music where it's like if you watch a movie, like Blade Runner, you have to watch that movie a handful of times to see all the different, tiny clues and metaphors in it to really get like what Ridley Scott is trying to tell you. And I think there's so much more value in something like that when you can discover a new idea or discover a new like musical motif that you didn't really hear, or rhythmic motif that you didn't really hear on the first couple listens. So it's always like a journey, like an evolving journey. And I think like getting that from movies and people like Philip Glass, who is a really awesome composer who is considered minimalist, but he's definitely not minimalist by any means. It's like a repeating pattern of ideas, and you can find something new in it every time you listen to it. And I think that's kind of like what I always try to do when I write this kind of music.
With having the man versus machine concept, though, is there ever a time where maybe like your own personal life or your own personal experiences are also maybe a source of inspiration for the music, or is the Zenith Passage meant to be like just a sheer escapism?
I think originally it was when I first kind of started doing it, but now it's turned into like way I can actually kind of put more emotion of how I feel into the music. And I think like Datalysium is that like there's a balance of how do you say that, mechanicality, if you will, is that even a word?
If it isn't a word, you're putting that as a song title on the next album.
Hell yeah, it's like a balance of that, and then like the human aspect of what life is, and and I think trying to just find that balance between it. And I definitely got to write more emotionally on this record, which was awesome. I put a lot more into like the thought of the emotion and how to convey what I feel into like a technical death metal aspect, I guess. So like the title track Datalysium is a ballad, so it's like a tech death ballad. So it's kind of interesting to put that out there.
You could say that again. Is there like maybe like a lot of research that's conducted into like into the concept, and like are you almost kind of like, is there other artistic mediums that you're sort of like bringing to the fold for inspiration in a way, or is this all coming from maybe your own interpretation and maybe like your own sort of mind and experiences?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Lyrically, like I didn't write most of the lyrics. I had some of the themes, but that was all Derek Ridquist who wrote the lyrics, and I kind of had ideas. But I think musically, it comes from like a place of pent up emotion that's kind of been there, that you're now discovering how to spill out of you and put it into a medium that is music. And then conceptually, it's kind of a lot of research, and it's kind of like a metaphor of what I see in society, or what we see in society with like the hold that technology has on humanity and society. And we try to convey that in a poetic sense, which is kind of hard to do. So it's like trying to find a balance of that as well. But yeah, definitely it's kind of a reflection of society nowadays and the hold that technology has on humanity.
Yeah. Is it, I mean, I feel like with you guys and Fear Factory, you know, very different sounds. Fear Factory having like the industrial crossover, but you having some symphonic and technical death metal. Either way, I think both genres of metal, despite them being different, are the best to sort of address this sort of technological concept.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Definitely Fear Factory has like that machine industrial sound, and they do it very well. And we try to kind of do that too. Like there's like a rhythmic motif and kind of ostinato that happens in some parts. And just like bands like Meshuggah, like Bleed, it sounds like an idling motorcycle, you know, like it's just kind of things like that you hear in the world that kind of inspire some of the riffs too. Because for me, I think metal is mainly rhythmic, and then everything else is kind of an expansion of that. But yeah, like I think it's a reflection of just everyday life too, you know, like driving a car, sitting in traffic, hearing a machine whir for like hours on end, you know, if you work in like a factory or some industry job. So yeah, it's like, it's interesting to take that and put it in a musical context.
Definitely. And I think there's like, you know, not to, you know, discredit what Fear Factory does, but they were writing this shit since the 1990s when technology, or they started even in the 80s when technology doesn't have that much of a presence as it does now.
Yeah.
But when you look at any medium that discusses that, whether like, you know, I was an art history major and they were making, you know, different artistic movements that expressed concern with this long into the 1920s when, you know, the assembly line was first a thing. And then, you know, you see movies like The Terminator that was fucking made in the 80s. They weren't experiencing technology. Yeah. Like, I think we're more entitled to make music or any art with this concept than any generation.
Oh, I totally see that. Yeah, it's like I guess back in the day it was more of a fantasy of what the future would be like. And now it's like we're kind of seeing the augmentation of like machine and like even artificial intelligence now, because it's like a thing. Like it's actually now integrated as an integral part of society. So yeah, we're actually living through it and seeing it happen in real time, where I guess is in the 80s and 90s it was more of a fantasy of what could be. So that's, yeah, it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm going to take some of the lyrics that are on this album and put them into ChatGPT and then tell them to edit it for the best format for SEO, which is like web format, and just see what the interpretation is.
That would be sick. That'd be sick. Yeah, dude, ChatGPT is sick. I use it to kind of figure out a lot of problems or like kind of things I have going on in life. Like you could type in a question and it gives you so many different interpretations of a solution that, I don't know, it's interesting to work hand in hand with AI. It's going to be cool, like, for the next 10 years, what's going to happen.
Yeah, people are obviously, and rightfully so, concerned about AI, but there's so much fun to be had with it as well. I just can't wait for AI to, like, really just write to somebody, you're having too much fun with this, go get a hobby.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's scared of, I think it has a lot to do with, like, film and like, you know, film and just fantasy in general with what, like, it's like machines have this sort of like power over us in the end, and it which ultimately is our demise as a species. But I don't know. I think we're in a place where it could actually really help humanity and the world. So
definitely.
I don't know. I definitely think it's I'm trying to be optimistic, but I definitely think it could change the world for the better.
If you don't move forward, you're only going to move backwards. So there's really no turning back. It's going to happen one way or another. I've always said my review of the Zenith passage is that you would be Elon Musk's favorite death metal band. So.
That'd be sick, dude. Yeah, I mean, everyone in the band besides me has a Tesla, so I don't know, dude. Maybe we can get that Elon Musk to endorse us or something.
Hey, you would be the first. I mean, that would definitely put the Zenith passage on the map, right?
Hell yeah! Have them take the record into space on the next SpaceX mission.
Oh man, be the first band to make an album in space.
Oh man, it sounds like something Death Clock would do.
Yeah, but maybe you guys could do it instead. And you know, one of two things will happen. It'll go the same way as the Challenger, hopefully not, or you'll make a kick-ass album. Either way, both turnouts will be metal as fuck. So
it's interesting. I wonder how that would actually happen, considering there's no gravity. So would that feeling of weightlessness make you want to write slower music?
I don't know. Well,
it'd be interesting.
Well, we're going way too far down this rabbit hole. I hope you have time. But like maybe you got to bring a doom metal band to space, bring a death metal band to space, bring a metalcore band to space, bring like a different genre to space, and we'll see what the results will be.
That would be epic. I 100% am down.
Yeah, because part of me does wonder if I actually do take the music. I can't imagine. I mean, the last space mission was Columbia, right? So that was 20 years ago. So they didn't exactly have iPods yet or MP3 players. So part of me wonders if I do take the music into space with me, if the gravity would automatically slow down the tempo.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess what's his name? That astronaut. I forgot his name. He's a damn. Anyway, he brought a guitar into space on the space station and started playing it, which is super cool to see. So I don't know. Maybe the way that sound travels in no gravity would be really interesting to write a metal record in space. Yeah. It's definitely going to happen in the next 100 years. Yeah. It has to.
I just hope I'm still doing music journalism when that happens. I will be punishing that PR to get that interview.
Yeah, dude, that would be so sick.
Yeah, I just can't imagine what the tension on that guitar neck will be. But anyway.
I know, right?
With the new album, though, this is the first contributions that both Brendan, Derek, and Christopher had with the band. You know, being that both Derek and Brandon were collaborated with the Faceless as well, was there maybe any similar commonality? Because even though they weren't on the same albums as you, was there maybe any sort of similar experience that you were channeling into that? And being that Christopher also plays with Dreamer, if that maybe also influenced and brought in new aspects into the Zenith passage?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Derek and Brandon and I, we all have the same influences for what the Faceless became. And I know we get a lot of flack or not flack, but people always say we sound like the Faceless, which I don't think so personally, but I can see why people think that. And like, we sound like that band is because it's a part of who we are. Like, we all have the same influence. Like, X-Toll is a massive influence on Brandon, on me, on Michael Keane, on Derek, obviously Necrophagist, Meshuggah, Cynic, like all those bands are much a part of me and all of them. So it's just like the same language we're speaking when we're doing all this and coming together. And being that we've had the same history together, or share the same lineage from that band, it's like, I don't know, it just clicks a lot easier and we get it. And we have this kind of shared experience from that's easy to kind of work with, and then Chris is like, he's great because he like grew up listening to bands like Zenith Passage because he's younger than us, and the Faceless, and all the stuff he does in Dreamer is just so crazy. And we worked together on 2 songs and definitely like took the band into an insane territory. It's like Div Inertia has some parts that is just so insane, and it's like I'm still trying to figure it out on a guitar to get it down perfectly. But yeah, like I think as a unit we work so well together, and it's definitely brought the band into totally new territory and kind of refined the sound even more than what I envisioned. So, but like Brandon is like a true like bass player, and being that Zenith is like a very groove oriented band, like working with Brandon to do the bass arrangements was like, let's take this in a different direction, because it's like most technical death metal bands, and I'm not trying to like talk shit or anything, but it's just like it's a very intense, it's like a third guitar, you know, like when you listen to like tech bands, it's like the bass is keeping up with the guitar, and that's very sick. But what if a bass player in a tech band just played bass like a bass player? So thinking about that and incorporating like funk and fusion elements while there's some crazy tech riffs going on, like, was an interesting take that we wanted to explore and on this record. And I think it worked very well, because like not only does Brandon have like insane like tone in his fingers and everything, that it's just being able to hear the bass come out in a different way as opposed to acting like a third guitar was it kind of gives more room for everything in the mix too. So yeah, it definitely was a pretty big, a very large part of the writing and tracking process was, how do you make the bass stand out more and be more prominent in the songwriting? So yeah, I think bass has a lot to do with the final product.
Well, bass playing in this technical genre is, I would say, just as important as the vocals, the guitars, or the drums. I mean, you look at Archspire. You look at Archspire, for example. I mean, Jared Smith is just a machine at what he does on the bass. You look at what's done in bands like Inferi, where like, you know, it doesn't have the greatest presence, but it's there and you just know it. Like, you look at all these modern day tech bands, and I'm just as mesmerized by the bass player. You know, this isn't rock and roll where the bass player is a meme and gets made fun of all the time. It's like an important instrument.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like Jared and Andrew, they're great bass players, and they absolutely shred. And it's funny because Jared, he's a guitar player, and then he became a very, very sick bass player for Archspire. So it's cool to hear him play as a guitar, almost like a guitar player on a bass, which is interesting. It's funny, when I was with Ibanez, or after I left Ibanez, I sold Jared one of my RGDs, and then after getting it, he ended up playing bass for Archspire, and I'm like, fuck, it's crazy. And then like years later, I saw him a couple months ago, and I'm like, hey, can I buy that RGD back from you? And he's like, it's kind of like a rare guitar now, huh? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh man, I could get a lot of money for that. I'm like, oh, fuck you, dude.
Well, hey,
it's funny, no.
We all have those regrets. We all have those regrets.
Yeah. I love that guitar, dude. I just want it back.
Yeah, well, hey, get on a tour with Archspire, steal it out of their van, and just blame the tour troubles. I mean, I might edit that part out of the interview, but and I have a couple more questions.
Jared,
what you were saying?
I was saying, Jared, just bring your that guitar, dude. Like, have Dean play it, and maybe I could play it, and then just not give it back or something.
There you go. You know, maybe you could secretly take Jared's spot on Archspire's show and see if anybody notices.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like, we have similar hair, right? So
yeah,
I might fit in.
I get mistaken for Steve Brodsky from Cave In and Mutoid Man all the time. So,
oh shit!
Yeah, and when I was interviewing him, I was like, maybe I should go up on stage, you play the background, and I'll take your role and see if anybody notices. So
damn, that would be sick.
Yeah. And I have a couple more questions for you, but when it came to the writing, not just for this album, but for any Zenith Passage album, is isolation a better element for you to write in? Is it better when you're more alone and there's nothing in between you because you focus on the guitar and all the instrumentals and like the programming as well? Do you prefer to like kind of be alone in your own element, or do you prefer to be in the company of your bandmates when writing? I'm
kind of like a recluse in general, so and an introvert, so like seclusion and isolation is like a pretty prominent part in how I operate as a human. So a lot of this record was finished at my grandparents' ranch in isolation in the mountains. And I think that was like one of the driving forces in the way the record ended up, is because I just operate better in isolation, and especially like being in LA for like 11 years now. It's like you're always surrounded by someone and you're always next to someone, like no matter where you go. And like being that I grew up on like a ranch, it's like, it's a very weird feeling to get used to. Like going from like very kind of open landscape to a sardine can. So I think isolation is a massive part of writing for me and being alone. But I also like to, after doing that, I like to get together with the band and discuss like, okay, what works and what doesn't, and how do we make it better, and work together on the base idea, and then kind of emphasize it or switch things up, and then get everyone else's flavor on it. And then like Chris and I, we work together by sending each other guitar profiles. And that's how we were able to write Deletion Cult and Div Inertia 2. So I don't know, I think we kind of figured out some new ways of songwriting on this record, which is pretty cool.
I find it so ironic because like most tech bands that are very technologically driven, came from a more isolated environment, like Obscura. You know, my family is from like the same region of Germany that they're from.
Oh,
and,
sick.
And like they're from like Bavaria's like the fucking forest. I mean, sure, it's like near Munich and stuff like that, but where they are in Landshut, I mean, that's not a city by any means. You look at the guys in Archspire, they're way up in fucking Canada, you know, like, so like, and you know, I know you're in Los Angeles now, but you know, writing this on a ranch, like, you guys have the most cult and black metal almost methodology of writing in terms of like, it's funny how growing up in a very atmospheric and very, secluded, non-urban, like very rural environment could lead to something that's very technically driven. I just find that kind of ironic in a way.
Yeah, it is funny, right? Like, I was just in Norway in April for a couple weeks, and it made me want to move there and just write music because of the landscape, and just because the vibe is just right there. So yeah, it's really interesting that like isolation and rural areas can bring out the music that we write. It's very interesting. Maybe because it's just a reflection of how we feel looking at society from afar. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's really weird.
I don't know why, but like when I I love this type of music, but I usually like to listen to it in certain settings. I'm listening to Inferi or Obscura if I have to walk through fucking Times Square. You know what I mean? Or if I'm like, you know, in kind of like the financial district where there's lights everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, you know, if I'm walking, you know, around Coney Island or something like that, that's when I listen to something a little bit more atmospheric or something like that. So I find it really ironic in that.
Yeah, it's like, it's the atmosphere, it's the ebb and flow of nature and humanity. And I think a lot of the record is kind of a reflection of that atmosphere and being in isolation in like a rural area. And then you can also see the insanity of it as well as being a person living in a big city in a sardine can, you know. So I think you kind of get both sides of it on the record.
Yeah, and to the contrary, a lot of the atmospheric doom bands that I know are from Denver, Colorado, or, you know, obviously Colorado's a very beautiful landscape, but Denver is not, you know, the fucking suburbs by any means. And, you know, you have bands in Portland, you know, that are killing it, that are very atmospheric and doomy as well. And then here in New York City, we have great melodic death metal bands, you know, like you would think that they're from Norway. We have a great underground black metal scene and a huge fucking stoner doom scene. So
yeah, it's great. It's got all flavors. Like Black Anvil, they're from New York, right?
Shout out
like
to those guys.
Yeah, they're very, you wouldn't expect a band like that from, like, being from New York, you know? It's like you listen to bands like black metal, American black metal bands like Abigail Williams, like Ken is based in Washington, and a very rural part of Washington. So you can kind of see where that atmosphere, at least on the last couple of records, would come from. And then like Wolves in the Throne Room, another band from Washington that you would kind of expect that given the landscape. So like you listen to bands like Black Anvil and you're like, oh, I would expect that band being in like a forested area. No, like they're in New York or Brooklyn, right? Or wherever.
Yeah. Well, the greatest irony for me is Nine Inch Nails coming from fucking Cleveland. Like,
yeah.
So, you know, it's there's got to be more research into seeing how the setting can really influence the sound. I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, this was the most scientific conversation I've ever had, and I interviewed Dino from Fear Factory like 7 times. So like, yeah. So I want to thank you for just an awesome, thought-provoking conversation. Is there just anything else with the Zenith passage that you'd like to promote for the release of Datalysium? Can we be expecting some upcoming tours? Hopefully, if there is a New York show in the works, or anything else that you'd like to plug that you're allowed to talk about at this point?
Yeah, we're still trying to figure out like a full US. We haven't done a full US in quite some time, and we know we're overdue for it. So we're working to make that happen as soon as possible. We have this tour coming up in July with Fallujah and Enterprise Earth, which we're very stoked for. I know it's kind of West Coast, so I apologize. And then we have our album release show in LA, July 21st, and it's a free show if you have the record. So. Yeah, it would be cool if you're in Southern California, like come on out for a free show. There's going to be like custom cocktails. There's going to be like tacos. There's going to be giveaways. It's going to be a celebration of the record. So
you had me at tacos.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, everybody. We are here with the Zenith Passage. Be sure to check out Datalysium coming out very soon. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.
Hell yeah.